Hey guys, good evening. Craig Setzer with you on what day of the week is it? Oh my gosh, look at that. Time flies when you're having fun, right? Unfortunately, this is not that fun because we're dealing with a potential hurricane for Florida. It is November and the hurricane season should be over, but it continues. Listen, if you like the videos, please click the like button, hit the subscribe button, and get the notifications because apparently when you like it, it elevates it on the platform and hopefully more folks can see it. Let's jump right into it. I was kind of long-winded this afternoon and kind of want to be a little more concise with my message this evening. So here's where we stand this evening, and I like to show this graphic right off the bat because for those who kind of dip in and say, is this something I want to learn more about? This is going to just, I'm not going to bury the headline. It's out there. This is what I'm focusing on tonight. It is the threat condition, which is now in the high category for the Northwest and Bahamas, there with the threat now for hurricane conditions, as well as the Treasure Coast and part of the Space Coast, the east central coast of Florida, where I think the expectation is that hurricane warnings will be issued, if not with the 10 o'clock advisory, then they will be tomorrow morning at the 4 a.m. advisory for a portion of Florida. Now, is that going to include Palm Beach County? Probably. Is that going to include Broward? That's kind of a close call there. Is the hurricane watch going to be upgraded into a hurricane warning, or is the hurricane watch going to be left in place, but a tropical storm warning also issued? And that would sound like this. We're expecting tropical storm conditions, but there's also the possibility of hurricane conditions because, of course, a watch means the possibility and a warning means the expectation or the likelihood. I think in Miami-Dade, it's going to be a tropical storm warning. I don't think we're going to see a hurricane watch for Miami-Dade. And the Keys, Upper Keys, kind of right on the edge for tropical storm conditions. You'll see here in just a little bit. Once again, as soon as the advisory comes in, we'll go to it right away. You'll hear the chime in the background, and we'll jump right over to it. On the West Coast, now the threat condition is low, but that means that the threat for hurricane conditions. It doesn't mean that the threat for bad weather is low. The threat for bad weather up and down the entire peninsula is high, but I created this graphic to say this is the area where you're going to have to make the most preparations, hurricane preparations. And typically hurricane preparations require, if you're in an evacuation zone, you might have to evacuate. Remember, we flee from the water, we evacuate from the water, we hide from the wind. So we hunker down or stay in place from the wind. So the expectation is all of Florida is going to see bad weather, but certain parts of Florida are going to see much worse weather, bordering on or into Category 1 hurricane conditions. So that's kind of the overall setup here. That's kind of what we're looking at here. I'm going to break it down based on our earlier advisory because I don't see the 10 o'clock advisory yet. Once it comes in, we'll go right to it. But based on the earlier information, what should we be doing now to prepare? I always like to think of meteorology as the what's going to happen with the weather, and then this part of meteorology, what I call the preparedness side of it, is what are we doing based on what we think is going to happen. So that's kind of what's going on there. And I just want to make sure, are you guys hearing me okay? I don't see my, oh yeah, I see my mic going. Okay, all good. Yeah. Okay, so basically what we're doing to prepare in the Keys is finish our preps by midday on Wednesday, because while the weather's going to get kind of bad and kind of stormy, I don't think it's going to be real bad in this case for the Keys. In terms of the closest approach of the worst weather, it's going to be on Thursday, probably Wednesday night into Thursday, the strongest winds. There is going to be some storm surge in the Keys, so you're going to have to be aware of that. Could be 1 to 3 feet or maybe even a little bit higher, but there's going to be some storm surge in the Keys. You're going to be wanting to tomorrow taking care of your boat items, your yard items, taking care of your boats, because we're going to have some pretty good tidal swings going on even in the Keys. So that's basically in the Keys. Now for Miami-Dade and Broward, and I say Broward with a caveat here because when we see the 10 o'clock advisory, if the track is a little bit farther south, we might have to lump Broward into the Palm Beach preparations. And I'll show you the Palm Beach preparations in just a second. But basically in Miami-Dade and Broward, we want to finish our preps sunset tomorrow. I think the winds are going to be up tomorrow, and I'll show you that in just a second. But we can still do some preps, take care of things in the lulls of the wind, and just avoid when any showers or squalls come through. The closest approach to Miami-Dade and Broward is going to be in the Wednesday night into Thursday morning time frame. So that's when it's going to be windiest and nastiest, let's put it that way. So tomorrow we're checking our hurricane kit and our plan. Remember, our hurricane plan always includes, are we in an evacuation zone? Even if we don't have to evacuate, we want to know if we're in an evacuation zone. And if we are in an evacuation zone, where do we go if an evacuation order is given? We don't have to flee the state. We don't have to flee South Florida. In fact, South Florida is one of the better places to be because our infrastructure is tested fairly often, and we're pretty resilient down here. You just have to get out of the evacuation zone. So in your hurricane kit, if you're in an evacuation zone, you have to have a plan to, if you're given the order, you just say, I know where I'm going. The people, my neighbors, my family, whomever out of the zone, they're expecting me, and I'm going to give them a call and tell them I'm on my way. I think that, unfortunately, and I'm not gonna kind of jump off track here. I think, unfortunately, that was kind of what was going on the southwest coast, is that even people who knew they were in evacuation zones didn't really have an evacuation plan, what they would do if an evacuation order was given. We're going to be preparing our homes tomorrow and our boats. And does that mean shutters? I don't think so. Well, let's put it this way. It's most likely a no for Miami-Dade. So Broward, it's kind of an iffy situation here. And if we don't have any clarity with the 10 o'clock advisory, when the 4 o'clock advisory comes in tomorrow morning, I'm going to be up with that. And we'll kind of make the call on the shutters, because tomorrow really is our last day to get shutters up if we're going to be doing that in Broward. So that's some of the things we're thinking in Miami-Dade and Broward. Do I think there's going to be evacuations in Miami-Dade and Broward? No. Do I think there's going to be some high tides that might cause some problems, especially on places like Las Olas just before the Intracoastal? Yeah, I think there's going to be some areas that may be inaccessible due to some storm surge flooding. And that's going to be a combination of the winds blowing on shore as well as the effect of the storm Nicole itself. Now, Central Florida and along the East Coast, this is our area probably right now of highest concern. We want to finish our preps by sunset tomorrow here. The closest approach is going to be Wednesday night into Thursday. When I say closest approach, I mean the worst of the weather. Tomorrow, checking our hurricane kit and our plan, taking care of yard items, preparing our home and our boats. Probably shutters from Palm Beach North. I'm going to say that's most likely the case for Palm Beach North. And by Wednesday, very early, I think there's still going to be enough time to, if we need to, in some places along the coast, move away from storm surge zones. There's also going to be a consideration because there's still a lot of rivers that are at or above flood stage from the rain from Ian. So you're going to have to consider, if you live in an area that becomes inaccessible due to rainwater flooding, that also might be something that you need to consider as well. All right, let's talk about the West Coast, because anytime an area has been hit by a hurricane, it's almost like you've been injured and you're just not as strong, and it's harder to get through even a small storm. So this is the case here with, of course, our friends and neighbors and family and whomever in Charlotte County, Lee County, Collier County, as well as Sarasota County, and even the inland counties, DeSoto, on through Glades, and on up through Sebring Highlands County there. All these areas that were really crushed by Ian are going to be more sensitive to even moderate tropical storm conditions. And there is that possibility, but it's not very high on the West Coast. In fact, as Nicole crosses the state, it's likely going to be weakening, and the wind field is also likely going to be shrinking, getting smaller, so that's good. So on the West Coast, and this is Tampa Bay basically down to Naples and Marco Island, we're going to want to finish our preps by sunset on Wednesday, although if you can get them done earlier in the day, that's fine. You don't want to be later than sunset Wednesday. Closest approach is going to be late Wednesday night and Thursday. So tomorrow we're checking our hurricane kit and our plan, taking care of yard items and preparing our home and boats. And what that may mean for some homes is you just make sure your tarp is on good on your roof, things like that for homes that have been damaged. And any debris, I know there's a ton of debris, but just in any ways that you can kind of protect yourself from the debris that blows around. In 2004, one of the things, and I was here going through that crazy season, we dealt with on the East Coast was Francis followed by Jean over nearly the same area. And so we had debris from Francis being blown in Jean, and at times it became hard to differentiate between, was it new debris or just old debris blowing around. I don't think that's going to be the case on the West Coast because the winds aren't going to be as strong for the Fort Myers area, Fort Myers Beach and stuff, and Port Punta Gorda. But the winds are going to be strong enough to blow debris around. So that's certainly something we're going to have to be careful about. Now, across northeast Florida, the storm surge threat is pretty big, especially the St. Johns River up in Jacksonville and Mayport. The values are going to be pretty high. Could see 4 to 6 feet of storm surge there at the tops. Right now, the values are showing around 3 to 5, but it could be a little bit higher, especially if Nicole travels a little bit farther to the north. But basically, the preps are the same as they are in Miami-Dade and Broward, which means maybe a shutter event, especially farther to the south, say from Daytona through Orlando, maybe. But it's kind of going to be a close call there. And then as you go to the north, it's just mainly going to be a flooding event, unfortunately, with very heavy rain, the possibility. And we'll talk about all of that as well. Let's talk about what's going on, the way it looks tonight. And there it is. You can see it's beginning to come together a little bit. You can kind of start to make out the piece that's breaking away and it's going to become the dominant circulation. And it's right in there. And you can kind of see that circulation starting to come together. There's a little new moisture channel starting to form that may be wrapped into the circulation. There's also, and I'll show you on the water vapor loop, there's dry air that's trying to wrap around it. This is a classic looking subtropical system because we have dry air and we have colder temperatures in the upper atmosphere and this background of a great big upper level low that's kind of sitting over it as well. But we also have tropical characteristics starting to form here, which are thunderstorms trying to form near the center. That's what we're going to be watching for. How quickly do the thunderstorms form near the center? How quickly do they wrap around the center? And we're in pretty good surveillance now with the hurricane hunters, so we'll be able to monitor the pressure. The pressure as it drops is going to be an indication that it is strengthening. The other thing we're going to watch is, are the winds, which have been strongest off to the east, are they going to come back towards the center? And basically, is the wind field going to contract? That will also be an indication of strengthening going on there. Here's the water vapor loop, and you can see, and once again, for those just joining us, we are waiting on the 10 o'clock advisory the second it comes in. We are going to go right to it right away once the graphics populate, but in the meantime, we're kind of giving a breakdown of what's going on here. So this is the water vapor loop, and you can really see still some channels of dry air still trying to wrap into the system, but as the upper low, which is kind of the background rotation there that everything's rotating around, and the smaller inner low, as they become more aligned with each other, then the wind shear drops across the center there where that center low is, and as the wind shear drops, then the thunderstorms can more easily kind of conglomerate. I don't know if that's a good weather word, but kind of congeal there towards the middle, and the dry air will more likely rotate around it. And so we're going to be watching all those things as indications of strengthening. All right, so here's where it is this evening. It's a little bit easier to find. You can see it right there with that little ball of thunderstorms. Once again, some dry air right on the edge of it. So it's going to be having to work through some dry air for a while. Where is it going and what's steering it? So we've got these features around the country right now. We've got this big blocking high. This is the issue here that is going to drive it to the southwest because the flow around a block is like that. And you can see as Nicole gets closer to the block, it's going to want to turn to the southwest. How sharply southwest? You know, the models are coming up with different solutions. I'll show you those in just a second, the so-called spaghetti models. But all of these things are kind of modeled a little bit differently. The models handle the ridge differently and how the circulation interacts with that ridge. So that is for tomorrow evening. Now then, as we go into Wednesday evening, the block is still there. It's starting to move a little bit to the east, but it's still influencing the steering currents there. But look at the big jet stream, that dip that's coming into the west. This is going to be the feature that crushes the blocking high and gives Nicole an opportunity to turn to the north. Also, when this feature here, this big dip in the jet stream comes along, it's going to increase the wind shear. That's going to be disruptive to Nicole. It's also going to accelerate Nicole to the northeast. And also, if Nicole gets into the eastern Gulf of Mexico, the sea surface temperatures, the Gulf temperatures are cooler, so we wouldn't expect a strengthening. In fact, I think the opposite is going to be the case there. So that's the Wednesday evening time frame. Thursday, there goes the block. Here comes the dip in the jet stream, and now this blocking high off to the east is starting to take over. So both the combination of the blocking high to the east there with a southerly component on the west side of it, and the jet stream dip here with kind of a southwesterly component to the wind are going to want to try to push Nicole to the northeast and push Nicole to the northeast at an increasing speed there. So once the storm gets across the peninsula there, it's going to tend to want to turn and start accelerating northeast, and will likely become lopsided as well, just because of that southwesterly pressure that's going to be developing on Nicole there. All right, it's 9:50 now. We are within 10 minutes of our advisory, and as soon as it comes in, once again, we'll get to it. There is Friday at 7 p.m. Now you can see the jet stream dip firmly in place. The blocking high really down here, not even influencing it much now, because the Nicole is so getting caught up into the jet stream dip. It's just being kind of accelerated to the northeast there, and then there you go. Let's take a look at the models here. So this is what I call the reliable models. These are the models that are we follow very, very closely. They do pretty well. We've got the European in there. We've got the specific hurricane models that are run specifically for hurricanes, the H-MON, the H-WRF. We've got some other global models. We've got the UK model in there, and we've got the American model, the GFS, and we've got the GFS Ensemble. And we've also got this Navy model here, the CTCX, which has done really well. The Navy model, CTCX, has done very, very well. And so you can see, here's our time frame up here in the upper left-hand corner. There we are, 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m., midnight. So that's Thursday night. And then you can see it's kind of zipping across the state. And you can see the Hurricane Center's forecast track there as well. This TVCN, that little one in white there, just above the hurricane icon, that's what we call a consensus track. And so that's all, many of the models kind of put into one. And most of the time, consensus works pretty well, unless you've got one model that's doing its own thing kind of crazy. Then it pulls the consensus off, because it's kind of a blend of the models. But you can see there's really, you have to say there's good agreement here on where the center is expected to go. So it's basically like that, and then the models all alternate. Now, some of the details here that are kind of we're going to have to watch closely are these little turns. The first turn is over here. It's when it turns, which way is it heading after it's done turning. This is the I think this is the H-WRF here, and it says it's not going to go that far southwest. It's almost due west. The the yellow one, which I think here is, let me back up and just make sure I've got that. I think it's the CTCX, yeah. So that's the Navy model, and that is showing more of a sharp turn southwest, and then a turn back to the northwest, and then a sharp turn there. There is the GFS Ensemble. It's been farthest to the south, but it hasn't jumped any farther south or moved any farther south. So the advisory is starting to come in. There are no changes to the watches or warnings, which means that it's still watches in effect for Florida. No warnings at this time. The hurricane warnings remain in effect for the Northwest Bahamas, and that's the chime for the advisory that's coming in as well. And I will get it to you now. In fact, let's just go ahead and we'll go to the new advisory. All right, so here it is. Still a subtropical storm with winds of 45 miles an hour. That's unchanged from earlier. The pressure's been slowly falling as the hurricane hunters have been finding their pressure down to 998. Pressure has a relationship with the wind speed, and typically in a system like this, we would expect the pressure to drop and then the wind speed to respond by increasing in intensity. So I think the pressure is going to come first. Sometimes you get crazy situations where it seems like the wind's increasing before the pressure drops. But I think this relationship here is going to be the pressure dropping. That's what we're going to watch closely. When we get down to around 990, right around 990 or 988 to 992 on the pressure, then we're probably going to start seeing some pretty good strengthening going on at that point. That's where the winds will likely begin to come up close to hurricane strength, if not hurricane strength. If it gets down into the well into the 980s, then we're definitely into strong tropical storm or possibly hurricane. And if we get into the 970s, then we're into the hurricane, probably Category 1. So as of 10 o'clock, 415 miles east-northeast of the northwest Bahamas there, moving to the northwest at 8. Once again, expected to turn there. Now, if you watch any of my videos, oh man, do I talk a lot about this. So that is the tropical storm condition area there. And as we advance into time here, I'm going to show you where the cone is. And the cone works great. Here's my little, I'm going to start preaching a little bit. The cone works great in 4 to 5 days to give people a heads up, hey, something may be coming your way. In 3 days, the cone starts losing its effectiveness. When a storm is less than 3 days away, the cone actually hurts the message. The cone detracts from what we are trying to say about a storm. And that's never truer than when you're dealing with a large wind field with a storm, because the cone only tracks the center point between two lines, which make the cone. It's not the storm. The cone doesn't represent the size of the storm. The cone represents what we call an uncertainty interval, which means that the point of the storm, that center point, the tiny point, will stay within the uncertainty interval 2/3 of the time, based on the previous 5 years of the Hurricane Center. So let's go ahead and, thank you, I'm done preaching. Let's go ahead and take a look. There is the cone. You can see it right there, very, very small. And look at the storm extending outside of the cone there. So these are the tropical storm conditions, and you can start to see a little bit of reddish there. It just barely starts to show up. That would be, we're approaching hurricane conditions there coming into the northwest Bahamas. So tropical storm, approaching hurricane intensity. This is the Wednesday morning time frame, and preceding Nicole here are the tropical storm conditions heading towards the coast here. That's why when we were talking about preparations, our time frame here is talking about sunset Tuesday night. So I know some people get alerts for coastal warnings, and typically what happens is that the National Hurricane Center and the Ocean Prediction Center and the Tropical Analysis and Forecast Branch will issue tropical storm warnings along the coast, up to the coast, but not including the coast. So sometimes I know a lot of folks will get alerts that say tropical storm warning now in effect. However, there are no land-based tropical storm warnings in effect right now. There are only tropical storm watches and hurricane watches. And I'm looking at the advisory here. In fact, let me make sure I'm looking at the right advisory here, because it skipped over there. Nope, I was on the wrong advisory. So let me start over again. Thanks for pointing that out, Jose. That's why you got to always check your sources, right? Okay, so new with this advisory, and this kind of makes me feel better, because I was thinking, oh, we're going to wait till tomorrow morning to issue warnings. Okay, so tropical storm warnings have been issued from Hallandale Beach northward to Georgia. So basically now all of Broward under a tropical storm warning, as well as all the way up the east coast. So tropical storm warning from Hallandale Beach all the way up. Tropical storm warning has also been issued for Lake Okeechobee. Tropical storm watch has been upgraded to a tropical storm warning from North Palm Beach northward up to the Georgia border, including St. Johns River. So here, let me read this one by one, and thanks for pointing that out about the getting the alert there, Jose. I appreciate that. Hurricane warning for the northwest Bahamas, including Abacos, which is northwest Bahamas, Berry Islands, Bimini, and Grand Bahama. Tropical storm warning in effect for Andros, New Providence, which includes Nassau, as well as Eleuthera. Also, tropical storm warning from Hallandale Beach up to the Georgia border and Lake Okeechobee. Storm surge warning from North Palm Beach up to the Georgia border and the mouth of the St. Johns River. Hurricane watch is still in effect, basically from the east coast, from the Volusia-Brevard line to Hallandale Beach. So, and I think we talked about this earlier. So Broward is in the unique position of being under two types of warnings and watches: a tropical storm warning, but also a hurricane watch, and that hurricane watch goes right up the coast. So we're confident, expectations are high, we'll have a tropical storm warning or tropical storm conditions, but it's still possible we'll have hurricane conditions. Let's go on with our advisory here, 10 o'clock advisory. So here we are now into, This is the time frame, and let me just advance it a little bit here so we can catch that next point. There we are, 7 p.m. So this is 7 p.m. Wednesday. That red area is the increasing area of hurricane winds. And I think what the Hurricane Center did here, well, I'm not going to try to guess the Hurricane Center. They did what they did. So tropical storm winds coming onshore here for Wednesday night, and there are the hurricane conditions offshore. Let's go on into Thursday morning, and you can see the tropical storm conditions encompassing the peninsula there. Farther away from where that center line is there, the track, these tropical storm conditions are more likely to be tropical storm gusts down here in the south, a little bit stronger up here in the north because of the high pressure area to the north. And then there we are, 7 p.m. on Thursday. So the forecast is Category 1, and then once it reaches the coast, weakening back to tropical storm, 7 p.m. Thursday. And then there we go to the northeast. So tropical depression there, and then a low pressure area off the east coast. So you can see the cone there is that little white outline, and you can see the tropical storm conditions don't look anything like the cone there. All right, so there is our watches and warnings, and the hurricane watch remains in effect, and the tropical storm warnings now in effect, basically up the coast there, including Broward. So that means that Miami-Dade is still under a tropical storm watch. And then the storm surge warning up there now to the north. And let me make sure this, yeah. So North Palm Beach, so basically on up to the north there along the east coast under tropical storm and storm surge warning. Here is, and let me stop this for a second here, and we'll talk about, this is our timing graphic here. I just want to do this real quick and not camp out here too long. So this is basically when do we expect the tropical storm conditions to arrive? And you can see they begin to come on shore there, and let me flip over to a little different graphic here. They begin to come on shore during the day on Wednesday, and then you can see there we are Wednesday evening, Wednesday overnight, Thursday morning, Thursday afternoon, and the weather's improving in South Florida Thursday afternoon, and there you can see as the wind field shrinks and the storm weakens, it kind of basically dissipates like that. So, all right, so that's kind of the latest. I think we covered a lot there, and I don't want to go too much longer. It's already been a half hour. So, anybody want to throw anything out there? What we're looking at and stuff like that, and then we can do just a little brief deeper dive into some of the other models for those of you who want to stick around. I don't want to ruin everybody's evening. This, by the way, is the, make sure I've got the right source here. This is kind of the storm surge area there. And you can see why the coast up there through Georgia, Jacksonville, will have the highest water rise. And so that's where we'll have the most significant storm surge. Some of the other hazards associated with this as well, there's the flood rainfall potential. This is the next 3 days, and these values in red here in Florida, those are basically anywhere from about up to 5 inches of rain there. So, and this is on already kind of moist soils there, so that not good going on there. On up in terms of tornado threat, there's a marginal risk, so not a real high risk with this one, unlike Ian, which came at us from the southwest and put us in that quadrant. Storms that come like this direction, they usually don't produce quite as many tornadoes. Let me move along here, and then I see some questions coming in. There's the intensity forecast. It has come down a little bit. That may be another reason that the Hurricane Center is just kind of hanging on to the hurricane watches there and not going on up to hurricane warning. So hurricane watch and not a hurricane warning. So chances the models are underdoing the high pressure and it goes more south. You know, that's a possibility. That's something we always deal with. But there's pretty good consensus now. Remember with Ian, we had that spread, that uncertainty that lasted right up until the storm was within 48 hours and continued, right up as the storm was moving to the west, so northeast rather. So we don't have that in this case. In this case, the models are in much better agreement. Some are a little farther south. And let me throw in one thing here because this I think is important to mention. Let me throw this up here. So this is the the tropical storm wind gusts, and this is where they're expected to be because for those who might be putting up shutters, especially Palm Beach and north, you want to get them done before the tropical storm wind gusts arrive. So there is 8 a.m. tomorrow, and then there is noon-ish tomorrow. And so the winds are going to be building throughout the day tomorrow, and then by tomorrow evening you can see it's blowing pretty good along the coast. So that wind field, by the way, is based on the European model there. And you can see there's a big, what we would call fetch of wind. So the circulation direction is like that. And because of high pressure that's up here, it's really creating what we call a tight pressure gradient or pressure difference between Nicole and that high. And because of that, that's why we're getting these really strong winds. So it's making the storm seem bigger than it actually is. The storm, I think, core where the strongest winds are going to be relatively small. But I think one of the takeaways here is that we kind of have, in the wind field at least, kind of a half a storm here, where the northern half is going to be much, much worse than the southern half. So if we go back to these spaghetti plots here, and we say that this draws the line of the north half versus the south half, let me get that up there. So basically what we're saying here then is that everything not on the north half of these lines here will have the worst weather, and along those lines, and everything below those lines will have much less bad weather, not nearly as bad. And it might be kind of fairly remarkable. I've seen some storms come on shore where Broward, it can be really, really bad. And folks in South Dade are like, oh, that was hardly anything. That might be a case like this. The problem we have is that the storm still has to do these turns and stuff, and we're not 100% positive it's going to go exactly here. So with that in mind, we kind of have to prepare a little bit more than we normally would because we're kind of close to where those lines are. Let's go back to real quickly the intensities. So once again, there's the category 1 threshold, and all of the hurricane intensities here in 48 hours, which is about the time of landfall, they're all now just below hurricane strength, so a strong tropical storm. Now, if it's up here in this 60, it's going to seem pretty bad. Discount the H wharf there. That is, we'll go in way out to sea and way beyond what we care about. A few of the models here, which kind of show, this is the Canadian model, and showing kind of that half of a storm impact there. This is for tomorrow evening. This is the GFS depiction. This is the H wharf depiction. There you can see the strongest winds on the north side, and there is the HAFS model, the new hurricane model that's coming out. So shutters for Broward, you know what? I'm going to say let's wait on that. Let's wait till tomorrow, and I will post some stuff or do another video tomorrow so we can talk about the shutters. Let's back up here and do another. Do you think a hurricane watch will be tomorrow? So I think the hurricane watch may be upgraded to a hurricane warning in Palm Beach County. I don't know about Broward. Broward, you know, the thinking may be it's just close, but it's not close enough. And if the tracks don't shift south overnight and the intensities don't come up, I think Broward will probably stay under a hurricane watch. Flying to Orlando on Friday, I think you'll be okay, Steve. Size of the storm. So I kind of covered that the north half of the storm being kind of big there with that flow between the high and the storm itself. I don't think this core, the center part of the storm, that's kind of what we're looking at there on the screen right now. I don't think that's going to be terribly large. So if we were just looking at a hurricane with no big high pressure that was creating this big wind field, I think we'd be looking at a medium, small size hurricane here, not something that's huge in terms of the core of the storm there. That being said, because of the high pressure to the north, there's a bigger wind field than normal. It's kind of being enhanced on the north side there. I think so. You know what? Yeah, it's clear the wind field. The question is, do you agree with the decision not to include Miami-Dade in the tropical storm? I agree with that. I think that's a good call. Excuse me. You know, it's still a tropical storm watch, so we can always be upgraded tomorrow morning to a tropical storm warning if things change. Remember, tropical storm conditions are winds sustained to 40, The expectation is we'd see gusts of 60. We'll probably see some power outages in Broward and more widespread as we get up into Palm Beach and Martin and St. Lucie counties, all the way up to Volusia. But I don't think they're going to be long duration power outages. FPL, for all the grief that they get, I think they've done a pretty good job helping make the grid more resilient, and I think it kind of shows itself. We still have some long-term widespread power outages when we have big events like an Irma, but this isn't going to be like an Irma, and I think so. Except for those that might get hit with the hurricane force winds, I think they're only going to be temporary power outages. Yeah, the models are coming into consensus on timing and also on track, Olivia. Strength of the storm. So as I showed you, and let me go back to that, the models are in pretty good consensus now on the strength of the storm. One of the issues with the strength of the storm is you can see there's not a lot of big spread. There's nobody in the tropical depression category. It's basically about 50 to just hurricane strength, 65 knots. So that's pretty tight consensus. Sometimes you see this, really huge spread. So it's pretty good agreement. Now, rapid intensification, remember, which is the definition of 35 mile an hour increase in 24 hours. That's not in the equation because the storm, number one, is subtropical. It has to transition to tropical. That's a slow process. That's not a strengthening process. Once it becomes tropical or gets a tropical core to it, then it has to kind of organize itself from that point. And by that point, it's going to be running out of time to organize because it's going to be just about to Florida. So land is, in that case, going to interrupt the strengthening process. Let's see. I think that is about it. So once again, not thinking shutters for Broward. Conservative intensity. You know what? I really, and this is kind of one of these. What's your impression, Craig, of what you think is going to happen or what's going on here? Your gut. My gut is that the National Hurricane Center is doing the right thing with this, and I'll show you. Get this graphic up here. Okay, so there are the warnings. So we have, let's break it down here. We have tropical storm watch for Miami-Dade. Tropical storm watch means possibility of tropical storm conditions. We have tropical storm warning from Broward all the way up. So tropical storm conditions are expected. But also on top of part of that tropical storm warning, we have a hurricane watch, which means the possibility of hurricane conditions. And if you think that Nicole is going to kind of come in this general direction there, it kind of fits right in that box of where the warnings are. In fact, maybe I can move this back here a little bit. You know what? I can't, but maybe I can show it a different way. Anyway, so basically, I think this is the right thing. This is, and if I was sitting in the chair, which I'm glad I'm not because it's a lot of pressure, I'd probably do the same thing. Keep the watch up in case things change, and go with the tropical storm warning. So let's see. Boca, Delray, Palm Beach. I think, like I've said with the shutters, and thank you for the state of emergency declared for 34 Florida counties. Probably a good call there. And I appreciate you guys throwing in on stuff because while I'm doing this, I'm getting no information. You guys become my information source. Impacts on Tallahassee, I don't think they're going to be too bad. Maybe some tropical storm gusts, summer thunderstorm type of stuff. Let's see. East Coast beaches. Oh, yeah. So especially, up through St. Augustine and north. Let me show you. This is one of the storm surge indications here, and all that red area is where the water is really going to be piling up by the wind there. Also, you can see the Grand Bahama there in the northwest Bahamas. Some pretty good storm surge there as well on the north side there of Grand Bahama, because that wind's going to be blowing out the north, piling up the water there, and those are kind of shallow areas there in the out islands. So yeah, this is going to be bad situation for basically from Jupiter north, Palm Beach north, in terms of coastal erosion and things like that. It's going to be a big deal. Northern Broward, southern eye wall. I don't know. And if you picture the eye wall, I don't think this is going to have like a good eye wall to it when it gets here. You can kind of see that in some of the models as well. A little bit of an eye wall in the H wharf. The Hafts has a little bit of an eye wall too there. It's possible. It's possible it could skim northern Broward, but these models are a little bit farther south than I think where the Hurricane Center has their track. So some of the models are a little bit farther. Of course, the GFS is crazy in south. It's possible, Jose, and I think we'll probably have a better feel for that once it starts moving southwest. What's going to go on. Fort Myers Wednesday night. I think you'll be okay Wednesday night into Fort Myers. Boca, Delray, Palm Beach. Once again, this is kind of we're right on the edge of shutters, especially for Palm Beach and north. If you feel comfortable putting them up and you can do them easily, then go right ahead. Palm Beach north. If it's a lot of work and stuff, it's one of those cases where, and I had the shutters that you hang until 2019 after Dorian, and I said no more. So I got the accordions, which basically shut down hurricane threats for Broward. But trust me, I know what it's like to hang shutters, and it is not fun at all. So right now, basically Palm Beach north on the edge of shutters. If it's easy to do, then you can do it tomorrow. It's not a bad idea to do it. If it's going to be a lot of work, I think I'd wait until we get a little more information, because I think we have till tomorrow's sunset to take care of that. If the H wharf verifies, will this affect Georgia? Yeah, Georgia's going to get, so Georgia is kind of in that northeast flow there. And when the storm is coming out here, it's gonna flip the flow around to southwest, so that'll take the pressure off. But while the storm is basically kind of coming in here like this, and then before it does its turn, that's really piling the wind in there. But in terms of severe tropical conditions, no. Maybe some tropical storm gusts in Georgia after the storm weakens when it's crossing the peninsula there. If the H wharf verifies, well, if the H wharf kind of is it's almost like the worst case scenario there. It's the strongest by far. It has that purple area there is the hurricane force winds in the core, kind of coming right in there into Stuart, Florida, and Port St. Lucie. So that's not a good scenario, obviously. If Nicole is able to organize and mature enough, then I would say this is probably the top end of what we're looking at there, which is not a very big hurricane, but it doesn't matter, because if you get hit by a hurricane, it is not good at all. If the H wharf verifies, so Broward would get some pretty good southwesterly winds, offshore flow, if the H wharf verifies there, because Broward is right about like that, right? And so the winds would be blowing southwesterly. So I mean, power outages, sure. Some heavy rain. Most of the heaviest rain is going to be kind of in that northern semicircle, the northern quadrant there. But could be some power outages, because these winds here, these are going to be hurricane force gusts along that, if that verifies. And remember, that's a model, and we don't know if that's necessarily going to happen. Like southern Broward. So southern Broward, I think, is well, let me put it this way: we're not feeling worse in southern Broward, because it looks like the intensity trend is not ramping up. I mean, there was that chance we could have been looking at something a bit stronger in some of the earlier model runs, and because that's not ramping up, I think we're certainly not, we're not feeling worse. I'm not going to say we're feeling better, because we never feel better until the storm is not coming at us. But that's kind of that. So, and I think if that is it, I think that's it. Yeah. So listen, guys, I really appreciate you tuning in, and I always want to make it interesting, and I want to make it informative, and I want to make it something that you want to come back to see again, obviously, but also something that's a little bit different from what most of the meteorologists and weather presenters do. I want to kind of dig into it a bit, but also give the preparedness messaging. That's what's really important to me, is that not only do we think we know what's going to happen, but then what are we going to do to get ready for that? So if you're just joining late, of course, you can go back and look at the beginning. I went through the specifics about what different parts of the peninsula will be doing. And then I think I'm going to check in tomorrow morning, let's say maybe around 4:30 to do a live one at 4:30, just to kind of, in case anything's changed. It might not be that long. It might be just a quick, I'm on, nothing's changed that much. But if hurricane warnings are issued, that's going to be important for tomorrow. So in the meantime, if you like the video, please, please, please click the like button, click the subscribe button, because that helps elevate the presence in the YouTube sphere, and also click the notification buttons so you get notified when we do these live things. So everybody have a good night. We'll check back in tomorrow. Maybe we'll have a busy day tomorrow, and maybe not. Maybe we can pause our preps where we are here if you have your yard items cleaned up and you have your flashlights ready to go. So I'll see you tomorrow.